Hello, my name is Pam Reynolds, and I'm a writer and artist. I live in Brighton, Massachusetts, and I'd like to welcome you to my talk about my book, Revamp, a Memoir of Travel and Obsessive Renovation, that just came out this year. It's available on Amazon.com, and it recounts the story of about the last 25 to 30 years of my life, moving from Boston to Italy, where I went to art school and where I learned a whole lot of things about life and art. So here we go. When we got to Sardinia, I my first view of it was something of like a tourist view, I suppose, because I hadn't ideas in my head of what I would find and what things would be like and where we would live. And it was sort of the view, you're on the coast in this beautiful Spanish stucco style house, and you have views of the sea, and you have tumbling geranium plants all around you and bougainvillea vines around you. And so I had sort of a tourist view of everything, but it wasn't exactly like that when I got there. We first ended up in a village, in a very small village in the center of the island. It was called Turalba, and it was about 1,000 people, and it was so small that everyone knew exactly who we were and what we were doing every moment of the day. And so that was sort of a shock to two city slickers, because my husband is originally from Rome and I'm originally from Los Angeles. And we are used to living in a place where you can come and go as you please and no one really notes it. You're pretty anonymous unless you want to make yourself known or seen. And so that gives you, in also that sense, a sense of freedom, because you're anonymous and you can do whatever you want and no one really cares that much. But in Sardinia, in a small village, everyone knows exactly who you are. And I don't know if they care that much, but they do know what you're doing. They can tell everyone else what you're doing. And so that was a little bit of a shock for us. So we stayed in Turalba in the house of a friend of Ugo's mother for a few months while we were looking around trying to get our bearings and decide what to do. And after having had the experience of living in a very small village, we decided that we definitely needed to live on the coast, because on the coast it's a little bit more open. They're more used to tourists and people coming and going. The area that we were looking in is called Alghero, which was a little larger than Turalba. Turalba had 1,000 people. Alghero has about like 40,000 people. So that helped. And we also wanted to live in the countryside, oddly enough, because we were both from the city and we wanted to try to have a country experience and know what that was like. And we found that exciting, and it was going to be an adventure. So that's how we ended up finding eventually a country house that was really just a small shack that was used as a vacation home by a Florentine family that had bought this before us and renovated it to become a very modest little vacation house. But formerly it had been used as sort of a place to store tools. And so it was just a place that people went on the weekends, but it was very, very small. And it wasn't really built to be lived in, which we discovered after we moved in. But anyway, so we found this place, and it kind of fit our notion of what life would be like in Sardinia, because it did have a huge lawn with palm trees, and it did have the bougainvillea vine, and it did have geraniums, and it was very modest, but it had just that je ne sais quoi that let us know that somehow this was our place. And we knew it immediately when we saw it, and we got very excited. So with that, we moved in. Once we moved in, the idea was that we were going to start like a bed and breakfast. And we didn't find out until later that you can't build in that area You have to keep everything the size of the footprint that is presently there. And it was a very small house. So the only thing that we could do was we could take an old carport that was there and turn that into a room. And that's kind of what we decided to do. That was one of our very first house projects. So the carport became our first room in our quote unquote bed and breakfast, which really never got off the ground. But we did have a few people staying there, paying guests, and we had plenty of non-paying guests also, just friends coming to stay there. And it was a beautiful little room. It still is. It still exists. And that was the first project, but there were many, many projects because we needed to put in a new septic system because that septic system wasn't built for people living in the house. It was just built for like summer vacationers. So we had to redo that. And we also found that the place itself was very dark inside because light isn't as appreciated as much as you would think in Sardinia because people are more concerned about it being very hot. So, and also this had been like a shed basically. So it didn't have a lot of windows and it had a big veranda on one side, which was one of the appealing things about it. But the veranda also meant that none of the rooms got direct sunlight. So, so that made it dark, and it was also very humid in the wintertime. So all of this we discovered living there, and every new discovery led to a new project. So when we saw how dark it was, we knew we had to knock down the wall to open up the space and to bring in more light. We knocked down part of the facade to create a new big sliding glass window that would go outside directly to the yard and let in light. And we built, because it was cramped downstairs, we built an upstairs, which was really just space that was unused under the attic. And it was inaccessible at the time, and we made it accessible. We created a little spiral staircase outside, and we bumped in 2 windows on each side of the attic, and we created a couple of windows in the roof. So that became actually a very large and one of our most favorite spaces in the house because it got lots of light and it was drier than it was on the first floor. So we did that, and ultimately in the house, we also changed the whole configuration of the downstairs. We redid the kitchen. We put in another guest bathroom. And so we put in new floors, and we were constantly tinkering with the house to remake it in our own image. And part of it was a hobby. Part of it seemed like an obsession. Maybe it was the fact that in Sardinia, it's not like there's a whole lot else going on and you really get into this. But part of it is also the Italians have their own obsession with the home and remaking things at home. And so it's not like we stood out in terms of redoing things because everyone else was doing the same around us. So that is what happened to us in Sardinia. But over time in Sardinia, also in Sardinia, I should say, I discovered myself as an artist because I had been painting a little bit before. I'd taken classes a little bit on the side. I was actually contemplating going into graphic design after years and years of being a reporter and a writer and an editor at the Globe. And I was just drawn to design. It's the other half of me. I've always drawn or done something with the arts before, but I'd never really taken it seriously. But in Sardinia, I found that I had the time to do that. So instead of pursuing a career as I had earlier, I decided to go to art school. And this was partially my husband, because I was like, well, what should I do? There's not a whole lot I can do here. I tried to teach English, but I didn't find that all that rewarding, and I could only do so much of it, and it was often frustrating because I wouldn't get paid and that kind of thing. So I was like, well, what can I do? And my husband came up with the idea of going to art school. And one of the reasons is because you can go for free in Italy. So I didn't have to worry about that. So I went back as a student. I was in my 30s, and I was, of course, one of the older students there. I wasn't the oldest because there was another woman who was my age, also in the same program, and then there was a gentleman who was probably in his 50s, maybe 60s, who was also in art school too. So there were like three of the elders there, among kids who were about in their early 20s, let's say, and maybe even younger than that. So I started at the academia. I loved my professor there. I loved painting, and I just knew that this was it, that this is the thing that I should be doing. And I sort of launched into that full scale. I went to classes there, and then we started visiting exhibits everywhere all the time, the Venice Biennale and any other museum. I just immersed myself in art, and had a whole new view of life that felt very fulfilling. But at the same time, after I was doing this and I was immersed in art, there was still a recognition that life was somehow limited in Sardinia because it's an island, it's small. There are 1.65 million people on the island, but that's it. And they're widely dispersed, and many of them are shepherds. And so that isn't really exactly who I am. I find it interesting and I can learn things from it, but it also felt like there was a lot of life that was being left out for me. So ultimately, we decided, okay, let's go back to Boston. Ugo was able to get sort of an appointment at Harvard where he was going to be there for like 6 months. And so we decided, we looked at housing prices, and we were like, kept going up and up, and rents were up and up. And we decided, you know what? It was at a time when buying was still feasible in Boston, and it's like, well, it doesn't make sense to spend this much on rent and just throw it away, even for 6 months. Let's just buy. So that's what we did. We bought a condo in Boston, in Brighton, and so there was a lot less to fix up there. And that was, on one hand, nice because I could really focus on art, where I took more classes, both at the Mass Art, the museum school, and even at the Cambridge Studio School. So I continued to take classes and see more art and immerse myself in art, and I had more time to do that because there was less house to take care of. But at the same time, of course, we wanted to keep improving where we were, and so we did small things that needed to be done in the small condo, which was just a one-bedroom condo, 650 square feet. And we did small things like we redid the kitchen cabinets and put in new windows and repainted and small things. But over time, we recognized, even going back and forth, that the space was too small because I was painting very seriously at this point, and I was showing, and I would have studio visits, and there was just not enough room or space for me to do anything, to paint or to have studio visits or anything. So we started looking for a 2-bedroom. I'd actually applied for a studio at Fort Point, but I got rejected, I think because I went back and forth a bit, and they wanted someone who was going to be there 12 months of the year. So I felt very frustrated. I'd had a studio in the South End for a couple of years with studio mates, but it was super expensive as well. And it was difficult to get to because I didn't have a car. Because we were going back and forth, we never felt like it made sense to have a car full-time in Boston. So I felt like the best use of my time and money was just to buy a larger apartment and convert the second bedroom into a home studio, which is what I did. So Ugo and I began looking for a 2-bedroom apartment. We were looking in Brighton and Brookline. Of course, it was almost as crazy as it is these days in terms of multiple bids and apartments falling through and not being able to find anything. So we were very discouraged. But when we happened upon our present place, we knew that it was the right place immediately, because it had 2 bedrooms that with the perfect disposition. It had 21 windows. It had no wasted space. It was right across the street from the grocery store and 1 block from the T line. And it was just convenient and we just felt like it was the right place. So we went and we made an offer on this place. But then it turned out that when we moved in, we knew that it didn't have enough light, similar to Sardinia. So what we did was we knocked down a wall in that apartment, and that was the main thing, and we redid the ceiling. But we were obsessive about renovation there too. The place felt so much better, and still does to this day. And it was a place where I could bring galleries by to look at my work, and we could entertain, and it was much less expensive than it would have been 1 block away in Brookline. And in the end, I think it might have been a better option than even buying the loft in Fort Point. So that's what we did there. And then later on, the 3rd player in the book is well, actually, there are 2 other players. There's an apartment in Rome where we rented for a while because Ugo's mother was sick, and we knew that we were going to be going to Rome a lot. And so we rented an apartment from a colleague of Ugo's in Rome. And so that's also a player in the book. But we couldn't do many changes there because we didn't own it. And then the last place also was an investment unit in the same condo building where we live that was suddenly available at a very low cost, and it just made sense for us to buy it, we thought. But it was just a pit. And so we bought it, and we gut renovated it and totally ripped out everything that was there, which, wasn't a whole lot. It was just a studio. But we put in a whole new kitchen and just redid everything. And before, it had been very sad. And it had been lived in by a gentleman who didn't treat it very well, because I think sad places often attract or reflect sadness in people. And so after we renovated it, the space transformed, and so did the people who rented it, because I noticed that it attracted wonderful tenants generally who loved living there and treated it with as much love as I think that we gave it living there. So I think that is one of the main points in the book, Revamp. Oops, can you see my name? Revamp. One of the main points is just that we need to infuse our lives with art on every level. And art doesn't have to be just if you paint, or even if you write, or if you're a photographer. That's not where that isn't even art, perhaps. I mean, it is one aspect of art. But art is really how you live, and infusing everything with as much love as you can, and with as much beauty as you can, because that's really all we've got. It's the best thing to get us through these times in our days. Maybe it separates us in some ways from some animals, but other animals kind of create works of art too, so I can't even say that. But it's art in life, and art in home is, I believe, critically important to our well-being and to our psyches and it's one of our purposes here on Earth. And in the end, I think that's what Revamp is about. It's part travelogue, yes. It's part my own personal story, but I think generally it's a plea to everyone to embrace life and bring in art into their lives where they can. So that's my brief introduction to Revamp. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much. And you can pick up the book on Amazon.com. Okay, thanks. Take care.